Hey guys, so something really cool happened. I've never really talked about this Jeep because it's just a basic Laredo 98 Grand Cherokee, but um, it has the 4 liter and it just hit 400,000 miles last night. So original drivetrain too, so original transmission, original engine, original front and rear diffs, transfer case. Nothing has been rebuilt on this as far as the drivetrain goes. The only maintenance I've done is typical stuff like ball joints, timing chain. Surprisingly, I did the timing chain at around 200,000 miles, so it probably needs to be done again. Water pump, radiator, alternator, power steering pump, specific things like that, CV joints. But other than that, the drivetrain is original. Paint job has seen better days. It's painted with like 3 or 4 different colors. There's surprisingly very little rust on this thing for being in Virginia the entire life of the vehicle. The only rust is there's some on the rocker panels, and there was some rust on the torque boxes in the front. There's like square torque boxes up in front that I had to cut out and fix. Other than that, it runs great still. So 400,000 miles. Let me show you. It still looks good too. It's a little dirty because it's been used for the farm, but interior is still really good shape. Like I said, it's just hay and stuff from the farm. It needs to be vacuumed and cleaned, but here, let me show you what 400,000 miles looks like. So 400,010 miles. Yeah, that's a lot of miles. So yeah, this is actually my mom's Jeep. She's had this thing for 23 years. She bought it when it was 2 years old. She drives it every day, 200 miles to work every day. So since she's here, I decided to show you guys, because she's here all the time actually. But yeah, so 400,000 miles, it's crazy. Let me show you the engine. And this is the bulletproof 4 liter, paired with a 42RE transmission, which is related to the 727. It's basically a 727 with a overdrive bolted to it. All the 42, 44, 46 REs are similar to that transmission. But these Jeeps have a rap for not having good transmissions, partially because people don't take care of them. This thing has had regular fluid changes. The oil change I do every like 5 to 7,000 miles. It just depends where it's at, usually when I get to it. But right now it's at about 6,000. So I don't really bother with that 3,000, 4,000 mile oil change bullshit. It doesn't need it. That's a waste of money. The oil that I've been using for most of its life is synthetic blend, usually from originally I used to use the Valvoline oil, but for the last, like, I want to say 7 years, maybe 6 or 7 years, I've just used cheap Walmart oil. So it has that typical 4 liter, tapping or whatever that, in the valve train. They all have that. But oil pressure is really good. It's still 40 psi cold, and roughly 35 when it's hot. When you drive on the interstate, it's like at 40, 45 psi. So their oil pressure has not actually dropped. It's been the exact same since 23 years ago, since she got it when it had 23,000 miles on it. So that's really impressive for 400,000 miles. Now, this engine has overheated once. That was actually my fault. she was having issues with it, and I drove to her work and filled up the radiator, but I couldn't find any leaks. There were no leaks anywhere. It was really weird. So I decided to drive it home. I left my Grand Cherokee over there, and as I was getting home, the temperature was going up, and so I stopped and looked, and it was still full. And I kept driving, and suddenly the temperature went from like 210 to like 250. It just jumped. It was really weird. And then the engine just shut down, and I had to pull over and open up the hood, and it was steaming, and it was hot as hell. I could burn my hands. And the radiator hose right here blew. So that was really strange. It's like the temperatures were not seeing what it actually was, and it was so hot it was actually boiling where the head and the block are. So I don't know how that happened with the weird temperature thing, but yeah, that overheated, and that was at about 360,000 miles. So it's driven another 30 to 40,000 miles after that. So I guess we got really lucky that it didn't crack a head, or it could have cracked the head, and it's just not affecting it right now. So coolant level stays the same. But yeah, like I said, so this is the 4-liter engine and a 42 RE transmission with 400,000 miles. So if you maintain your stuff, it'll last a long time. So, and you also have to have a good base as well. So like the modern Jeep engines and Dodge and Chrysler stuff are just, they're not that great. So I've seen Pentastar 3.6 liter engines with engine knocks at like 100,000 miles. They need to be rebuilt because the camshafts and the lobes, and I'm sure you guys are all familiar with that stuff. But I was actually watching a guy's channel. He's a pretty smart guy. He works mostly on Mopar stuff, it seems, but he was showing a video where he was, one of his co-workers was doing a rebuild on the camshaft and lifters, and he was saying the engine had 200,000 miles on it. Well, I mean, 200,000 miles is really not a lot for an engine that should be reliable. So using that excuse is kind of bullshit. So I mean, this engine has 400,000 miles. My 5.9 liter V8 has 220,000 miles, and that engine is running great. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just like this thing. It sounds perfect. I just don't drive it that much because I have two vehicles. So my other engine has 150,000 miles. That thing is running good, and that engine, these engines are basically from the 60s, 70s, or whatever. Like the 4-liter is derived from the AMC 4.2 liter. They're very similar. And the 5.9 Magnum that I have is derived from the 5.9 or 360 LA engine. So these engines have been a while for a long time, and they really don't have many problems to them besides the cracked head issue on the 5.2 and 5.9 Magnum. So, but that usually doesn't affect the engine. So but yeah, so I don't want to make the video like 20 minutes long, but this is the 4-liter and 400,000 miles. So I am thoroughly impressed with this car, and it's still going. So it's still going. No issues with this thing. I've got to replace the power steering pump here soon, but yeah. So my main gripe with these cars is not the original base of the car, but it's the replacement parts that you buy. This crap made in China, like the alternators and the power steering pumps and even the radiators and all that kind of, the CV joints and all that stuff doesn't last very long. It's like you buy it and it goes bad after a year or two, and then you have to replace it again and again. Like I've gone through probably 4 alternators on this car. I guess that's not bad if you do the mileage for alternators, 400,000 miles. But the problem is the original alternator lasted for like 250,000 miles, and then I've had to go through other alternators, it seems like every other year. So power steering pumps constantly go bad. Radiators usually leak all the time after a year or two. It's just very frustrating on replacement parts, and that has nothing to do with the Jeep itself. It's just where these parts are made. So they're all made in China. So even stuff made in the United States, like I have a PowerMaster alternator in my Wagoneer, and that thing is made in the United States, and it's already making noises from the bearings. It's like, and that's an expensive alternator. That's like a $300 alternator. So but anyway, yeah, 400,000 miles. Take care of your stuff. And the reason why the transmission is at there, like I was about to say, but I interrupted myself, was I do regular transmission fluid changes on this thing. So I do them every 30,000 miles. I drop the pan, change the filter, and replace the transmission fluid with ATF plus 4, which usually takes about like 5 to 6 quarts. Yeah, it just you just got to maintain your stuff. So and as far as transmission flushes, a great example is actually my mom. When she got this thing, she drove it to 80,000 miles without doing any type of like maintenance, and the transmission wouldn't shift out of first gear. It was just stuck. And this is when I was a kid, and the guy who flushed the transmission said the fluid was black. So the fluid was actually flushed with a machine, and it has 400,000 miles on it. So flushing is not bad. It's better than just letting the transmission, not shift and sit there with black fluid. You got to get that stuff out of there somehow. So after that, my mom learned her lesson, and she's been maintaining this thing regularly since. And of course, I took over like 15 years ago to maintain everything and make sure everything is filled up and topped off and so forth. So do your maintenance, and your car will take care of you. You take care of it, it'll take care of you. So 400,000 miles. Thanks for watching, guys. On to 500.